Oh, hey, good morning, good afternoon, everybody, depending on which part of this beautiful country that you live in. My name is Sheila Gunn Reid. I am the editor-in-chief here at Rebel News, and I'm also the host of our weekly show, Rebel Roundup, wherein we talk about the news of the day completely unscripted, sometimes completely unprepared, as I might be today. And it's a look back at the week that was. The reason I say I might be slightly unprepared is because I have just been touring our documentary, and I'm not done touring the documentary. It's just that the documentary tour took me close to home. So I came home, kissed my kids, had a shower, and I'm here to host Rebel Roundup. But if you'd like to find out about our documentary, you can go to endmade.com. It's endmade.com or madedocumentary.com. Both take you to our latest documentary. It's called Made, The Dark Side of Canadian Compassion. MAID is the euphemism, medical assistance in dying, for Justin Trudeau's radical, I would call it eugenics, but at the very least, euthanasia policies in Canada. It's medical killing, really, where we have taken what was sold to Canadians as compassion for people in intense suffering whose lives are foreseeably ending, to offering it to anybody who is even moderately slightly inconvenienced. We went from offering it to people who were chronically ill to now people who are sad, homeless, drug addicted, or frankly, just done with living, and the mentally ill. So our documentary talks to the people who have experienced this, both in the first iteration of medical assistance in dying to where it is rapidly heading to. And we also speak to the people who are fighting to make a difference, to save people's lives, to make medical assistance in dying unthinkable for people. Our tour is called the Choose Life Tour, and you can find a city near you. So tonight we're in Edmonton at our friends at Church in the Vine. You can get tickets, like I said, at endmade.com. And I would love to see you there. It's a documentary that I'm not sure that you will like or enjoy, but I think you will appreciate the raw honesty of the people who sat down with us and the filmmaking skills of my filmmaking partner, Kian Simone. He's our head of documentary. Sorry if I'm going in and out of focus there. I think my 8-year-old camera has finally, given up the fight. And I think I might have to replace it after I get back from the documentary tour. So I should tell you how you should get involved in the show today. If you are watching us on YouTube, thank you so much for sticking it out on that censorship platform. But if you would like to see the show uncensored, live, and in a way that you could perhaps support the work that we do here at Rebel News, might I suggest you migrate on over to two great free speech platforms that don't care about your politics, and I don't care about theirs, and that's the way it should be. We've got Rumble and we've got Odyssey. You can do all the things that you can do on YouTube on these platforms, like engage in a live chat, but you can do something else too. And that is leave us a paid chat to support the work that we do here at Rebel News. On Rumble, it's called a Rumble Rant. On Odyssey, it's called a Hyper Chat. And I realize, friends, that Justin Trudeau is picking your pocket harder than ever before, finding new and creative and sinister ways to make you poorer. So I appreciate that you would spend what little bit of money you have left supporting the little independent network that could. So if you are making a paid chat, if it's above the $5 US cutoff, I am hereby obligating myself to read it on air. Oh, this camera is going to drive me and you crazy. I hope you don't get car sick watching me go in and out of focus. So if your paid chat's over the $5 minimum, I'll read it on air, but don't let that be the bar for entry. We frequently read chats that are below that amount, or even the interesting free chat. So those are the rules of the show. I've told you about the documentary. I've wasted the first 4 minutes of the show with all the rules, and I'm a conservative. I don't like rules. So we've got that out of the way. Let's talk about Chrystia Freeland. Some days that woman is my muse, you know? I look at her and I am just full of jokes and snide comments. And she's done it again. She's inspired me. Now, look, I'm not one. No, that is not true. I am one to make fun of someone else's appearance. But I realize I've got no business doing it. I'm not a supermodel. In fact, I'm looking pretty haggard and tired these days. And I have unruly hair. And look, I'm not for everybody. I get a lot of hate for the tattoos. That's fine. I don't care. I'm not for everybody. And I know that. I wish Chrystia Freeland knew that also, because she thought she would excoriate the leader of the opposition, Pierre Poilievre, in the House of Commons for wearing more makeup than she does. I'm not sure. I'm not sure how much makeup she wears. Oh God, what a beautiful freeze frame of that woman. She is just like a gremlin who lives within the economy of this country, just destroying it. And she looks the part right there. Let's listen to this clip and then let me see what sort of things I can allow myself to say on air about what she had to say to the leader of the official opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the Conservative leader is wearing more makeup than I am today. Now, I think it's wonderful.
I'm going to ask colleagues. Order. I'm going to ask the Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance to withdraw that comment. We don't comment on the appearances of members. The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and the Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I'm sorry, I withdraw that comment.
Can continue with her. She has 25 seconds left on the clock for her answer.
The fact is, Mr. Speaker, the Conservative leader is phony all the way through. He is phony when it comes to his concern about the economy. All he can do is talk our country down. And he is phony when he talks about his concern about the opioids crisis. He tries to score cheap partisan points. It's just not right, Mr. Speaker.
That's right.
He tries to score cheap partisan points. Did you hear that? That's what she's saying. She stands up. She's only got a limited amount of time to respond to the questions, and she wastes it with what the left would tell me was a sexist attack on Pierre Poilievre for existing outside of the gender binary. I don't know if he wears makeup. I don't even care. If he does wear makeup, it's very well applied because I haven't noticed it. And if he is wearing makeup that is so well applied, might I suggest the Deputy Prime Minister slap some on her mug? It's interesting, although, that the question was on the opioid crisis, because if you watch Freeland without the sound on, which is the best way to watch Freeland, right? That her noise out of her mouth is just grating. And I say this as a woman whose voice is often described as shrill. Watch her without the sound, because she looks like she's in the throes of some sort of drug addiction. I've seen people doing a little bit of that boogie in downtown Edmonton. And the good thing about Edmonton is we can just snatch those people up and send them to drug treatment these days. Someone get the old butterfly net for her. Look it. Either her inner demons are trying to be her outer ones, or she's in the throes of some sort of Adderall addiction. I don't know what's happening there, but imagine that this is your public persona and you stand up and waste your time in the House of Commons talking about how the leader of the opposition might wear makeup, might wear some concealer under his eyes because he's working night and day to try to save the country from the Liberals. Give me a break. Like what a useless comment. She actually thought it would be funny. She stood like that was not off the cuff. I don't think she says all that much off the cuff. I don't think she's an intelligent woman. And I think her time at Reuters would indicate that that much is true. So I think that was like a pre-prepared thing. One of the communications gurus at the government caucus gave her that to read, and she stood up and thought, yeah, I'm going to show him. I'm going to tell a big funny, and I'm really going to stick it to Pierre Poilievre. Instead, she had to withdraw the comment after even it was too much for the partisan Liberal Speaker of the House of Commons, Greg Fergus. So well done. Deputy Prime Minister of Canada, Chrystia Freeland. All right, still on Chrystia Freeland, still on this insufferable harpy. Let's go into Chrystia Freeland and Justice Minister Arif Virani getting grilled on bail reform. I forget how many Liberal cars, like government cars, have been stolen, but the number's in the dozens. So the government is not even safe from Justin Trudeau's soft on crime, catch and release bail policies where, I mean, there's no cash bail for a lot of these things. We're keeping Justin Trudeau's political opponents in jail for up to 50 days, as is the case with Tamara Leach. But recidivist gangsters who are part of organized crime rings
any announcement towards combating auto theft is a welcoming step by the government. And in last so many years, so much of damage has already been done. And who is accountable for that? And what is the damage? Canadians wanted to see the changes in the criminal code in the last 5 years. They wanted to see the effective bail reforms so that criminals were behind the bars. We had seen recent Highway 401 crash where 1 3-year baby and grandparents, they died, and those suspects were out on the bail. Same things we are seeing now also. Scanners, in the budget is mentioned that over the next 3 to 5 years we'll get the scanners. Why don't we get the scanners in last 3 to 4 years? And loss to Canadian taxpayers is approximately $1 billion every year. If we calculate last 5 years, it's a $5 billion loss, 50,000 of insurance claims, and there's a taxpayer's money. And then we give 15 billion to other countries also. So 20 billion, we could not have improve our healthcare system where emergencies wait time is 5 to 6 hours. Thank you.
So thank you for those questions. There's a lot in there. Let me start with bail reform. So with respect to bail, we've been attentive to this issue, very attentive to this issue. And on bail, we worked very collaboratively with every single provincial government in this country, every single territorial government in this country, as well as law enforcement right around the country. That resulted in a bill called C-48, and we were able to secure passage of that bill this fall, and it's already been given royal assent and come into force. How does that connect to this issue? Things like serious violent repeat offenders now have a reverse onus on bail. So instead of being presumed that they're entitled to bail, it is presumed that they are not entitled to bail, and they have to convince a justice of the peace otherwise. That's significant reform. What I'd say to you here is that on that bail piece, that took about 1 year to get, maybe about 6 to 8 months to get to the point of tabling legislation, and 1 year to get it passed. Now you've got a February auto summit, and we're in May, in 3 months' time, and we're already proposing further surgical amendments to the criminal code. That's very, very important in terms of increasing the maximum penalties.
You see a lot of us here today, a lot of federal MPs and ministers, a lot of elected officials from Brampton, from Mississauga. You see some of our senior law enforcement leaders here. We're here on Victoria Day because we take this issue extremely seriously. We know the challenge is real and urgent. And the reality is we have a plan with specific, tough measures. Many of them require actual legislation. They require changes to the laws we have on the books. We have put forward that legislation, and now it needs to be passed. And it can sometimes feel like parliamentary maneuvers that you see in Ottawa are just about political games, and they don't affect, you know, an ordinary person just living their regular life in their community, in a beautiful community like Brampton. But that's not true. We need these measures to be passed, and the games that we see being played at parliamentary committees and in the House of Commons, ongoing endless filibusters that mean it is taking far, far too long for urgent measures like this to be passed, that is hurting the lives of Canadians, and it is the Conservatives who are doing this.
What in the hell is she talking about? By the way, she reminds me of Miss Lippy from Happy Gilmore, the kindergarten teacher that sits in the classroom and just like paints her face with glue while all the children are out running around. That's how she talks to Canadians. But what in the hell is this woman talking about? She is part of a government that forms a majority, although it's a minority government, but they form a majority with their enablers in the NDP. If legislation needs to be passed, guess what, sister? You're the one to do it. Don't blame the opposition for not getting things done. And they should not stand on their high horse and say, it's the Conservatives stopping bail reform. Conservative premiers are so sick of their ragging the puck on this issue and cuddling gangsters that Conservative premiers are taking matters into their own hands. For example, in Alberta, Olivia, I flipped this to you in the Slack channel. Back in September, we were so sick of the feds not doing anything and also releasing dangerous offenders back into the community that our province said, we'll do our own bail reform. Thank you very much. We can't wait on these jerks in the federal government to do anything while our communities are being plagued with social decay. So Alberta did a couple of different things. We have sheriffs, so we have a provincial sheriff's department. Some of those sheriffs are going to be tasked with monitoring people out on bail, like going and knocking on the door. You're under house arrest? Knock, knock, knock. We're here to make sure you're there. So officials, this is from Red Deer Now, officials with the provincial government say Albertans deserve to feel safe and protected from repeat offenders, which is why the province says it's introducing new measures to make sure Albertans feel secure and protected in their communities. According to the government, targeted prosecution units in Alberta's major urban centers will address deteriorating safety and keep Albertans safe from those who commit violent crimes. The Alberta Crown Prosecution Service is expected to create teams with expertise to focus on the increased level of crime and the prosecution of violent criminals in Edmonton and Calgary. Prosecutors on these teams will work with law enforcement to focus on special issues affecting these communities, including drug houses and available social supports. The position of the Alberta government is absolutely clear. There's no safe haven in Alberta for criminals. So we have these special prosecution teams meant to deal with them, sheriffs who are monitoring people out on bail. And it says, in the absence of needed bail reform from the federal government, Alberta is taking a zero tolerance approach to ensure its citizens are safe and secure in their communities. Violence, social disorder, and open-air drug use is unacceptable, and we will do everything in our power to take back our streets and ensure they're safe for Albertans. So they're increasing investments, money, let's just say what it is, in the Alberta sheriffs, including hiring 100 more street-level police officers in Edmonton and Calgary, and a $5 million grant to improve public safety in their transit networks. So there are things that can be done like that, if there's political will to do it. The feds don't have any political will to do it. And while Chrystia Freeland talks about the Conservatives filibustering at committee, I am one of those rare people who has the displeasure of watching these committees in the course of my work. And I see nothing but Liberals wasting time in these committees. For example, yesterday I had a couple of hours in Lethbridge before I had to leave to go to the Red Deer screening of our documentary. And so I thought, why don't watch SECU? That's the public safety committee. See what's going on down there, since social disorder seems to be a bit of a thing. We have a Conservative MP, Frank Caputo, reading a letter from Paul Bernardo's victims to the government at committee, wondering why Paul Bernardo ended up in medium security. He's a serial rapist, technically a serial killer. He's got 3 victims over a period of time. They're not a mass killing. He's a serial killer. And an absolute failing of the justice system that he was allowed to get away with being the Scarborough rapist for so long. And then he meets his lovely bride, Carla, and all of a sudden they end up killing people. And he was a rapist for a long time before Carla came along. So it makes you wonder who actually was doing the killing. I think there's some arguments to be made on either side. Anyways, he's serving life in prison. She's walking free with a brand new name. And he's in medium security. And the victims wrote a letter. The Liberals and the Bloc interrupt the reading of this letter to complain about tone. Frank Caputo was talking too loudly. Then he was talking too quietly. Then he was hurting the ears of the interpreters, although the interpreters did not complain. He was too passionate. They wanted him to talk normal. No one would say, it was the dumbest waste of time I've ever seen in my life. And if I were a living victim of Paul Bernardo, as though and there are many, the families of the dead, his rape victims, they're out there. They're watching. The Liberals and the Bloc just have no regard for victims whatsoever. And Chrystia Freeland obviously shares that sentiment where she's blaming the opposition for the things the government that has been in charge of this beautiful country for the last nearly decade have failed to do. Maybe Stephen Harper did it. Is it the ghost of Stephen Harper's government still terrorizing you? Finance gremlin. Okay, let's keep going. Speaking of the social decay plaguing Canada's major municipalities, I hope Doug Ford starts doing some of the same things that we're doing here in Alberta with regard to what's happening in our progressive run big cities like Toronto. Toronto is starting to look like Port-au-Prince, Haiti these days, with just people committing violence on the street, like full view of everybody. We had a firefighter sucker punched by a guy who I watched the video a couple times. I tried to figure out what's going on. I think he tried to carjack somebody. That person sped away and avoided the carjacking. And then he runs up to another car. Seems like he's trying to carjack that person too. And then he jumps on the side of a fire truck. Who has the lights on, by the way, or that has the lights on. So I think they're going to a call. And then this guy just jumps on the side of the fire truck and starts assaulting the firefighter driving the fire truck. And so a passerby has to come and a couple of times just grab this guy and like throw him to the ground. What is happening in Toronto? Maybe we need to send our Alberta Public Safety Minister over and help you out. Let's watch this footage. It's crazy. Welcome to Canada.
Son, he's bleeding on the car. He's bleeding on the car, son. What's going on? What is going on? Oh! 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 You what the fuck? What the fuck? What the fuck? What's going on? What's going on?
He lock up. He fucking lock up. He lock up.
Yo, what's going on right now? What's going on? What's going on?
Oh! He lock up.
What in God's name is going on in Toronto these days? You know, and people are just standing on the street corner screaming, although this is Canada. So you know who's probably going to get charged with assault? The guy who grabbed him off the fire truck and threw him on the ground twice. This is Canada. That guy's probably going to get slapped with an assault charge and dragged through the system until the prosecutors say, we've punished you enough with the process. you're free to go. What a mess. Open air drug use in the streets of Toronto. You know, what a failed state Toronto is these days. Let's hit an ad break and then let's go into Israel versus the International Criminal Court and a little bit of immigration craziness.
It wasn't always like this. When did everything change?
We want freedom!
I have a valid court order here today to vacate everyone from the building.
Bye, Daddy.
I don't think anyone would call it a democracy.
An historic church in northern Alberta has been destroyed by fire.
Major shortage of that, and the cost of living has skyrocketed.
Shame on you!
Is anyone going to push back? There are rebels among us, strong and free, rejecting the new normal, unwilling to be silenced. So what is a rebel?
A journalist.
A farmer.
A hunter.
A father.
A mother. A student.
A real female athlete.
A patriot.
Bold, fearless, and unconventional. Rebels rise up.
Small fringe minority.
Folks, it's undeniable that our rights and freedoms are under attack. The Freedom Passport is an easy-to-read, pocket-sized booklet containing the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. There's an app, too. Easily access the Freedom Passport on your phone and compare rights and freedoms from around the world for only $3.99. Visit freedompassport.ca and get your Freedom Passport today.
You know, I love that What is a Rebel ad. I got in a fair bit of grief for tracking some sand into the freshly detailed tractor when somebody came home from work. But that's like every time I watch that video, and I am a rebel for a living, but every time I watch that, I feel so good about the work that we do and the people that we work with and the stories that we tell and the people who support us in our efforts to bring you the other side of the story. It's a great sense of pride, and it's strange. Like, I was involved in the making of that commercial, but to see it all come together and to see the people whose causes we defend, the normals of the world, kind of emotional. Just make it a little bit misty. You know what I mean? Okay, let's go into Israel versus the International Criminal Court. So, the International Criminal Court, of which the United States nor Israel are signatories to, have decided that they want arrest warrants against Netanyahu for fighting back on behalf of innocent Israeli civilians who were murdered, kidnapped, and otherwise terrorized on October 7th by a known terrorist entity called Hamas. Let's watch this first, and then we'll go into Trudeau's surprisingly reasonable reaction. So let's go into, and then I want to get into who's behind this baloney and call her out for being the absolute hypocrite that she is. Okay, let's do the International Criminal Court announcement. Please, s'il vous plaît.
I can also confirm today that I have reasonable grounds to believe, on the basis of evidence collected and examined by my office, that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Minister of Defense Yoav Gallant bear criminal responsibility for the following international crimes committed on the territory of the State of Palestine from at least the 8th of October 2023. The crimes include starvation of civilians as a method of warfare, willfully causing great suffering, serious injury to body or health or cruel treatment, willful killing or murder, and intentionally directing attacks against a civilian population, as well as crimes against humanity of extermination and or murder, persecution, and allegations of crimes of committing other inhumane acts. It's alleged that these crimes were committed in the context of the ongoing armed conflict and as part of a widespread and systematic attack against the civilian population of Gaza, pursuant to a state policy.
That's good.
Unfortunately, these crimes...
So October 8th, the Israeli government retaliates, tries to retrieve 240 kidnapped mothers, babies, grandmas, and other civilians who, many of whom their families have not seen proof of life for a very long time. I mean, the IDF is just retrieving bodies of people who were known to be kidnapped from Rafah this week. So there's great irony and a complete and total lack of self-awareness with this International Criminal Court. And, you know, Israel was wise not to sign off onto it because they want to prosecute you for defending your civilians from an existential terroristic threat after it has attacked you. Now, Justin Trudeau was asked about this. Let's hear what he has to say.
Obviously, the International Criminal Court is independent in its work, and I've said from the very beginning how important it is that everyone respect and abide by international law. What I will say is troubling, though, is the sense of an equivalency between the democratically elected leaders of Israel and the bloodthirsty terrorists that lead up Hamas. I don't think that's helpful.
So Canada played a role in establishing the International Criminal Court. And anyways, if you Google our involvement in it, obviously there's speak of gender and other nonsense. But we're part of the problem here. So it's really interesting for Justin Trudeau to say, you know, they're independent. Really, they're not. They're just as influenced by radical anti-Semites as the United Nations is. And with good sense that Trump did not sign on to it and Israel didn't sign off on it because, boy, wouldn't it have been weaponized against Donald Trump, hey? If he tried to take any action at the southern border, they would have been like, yep, you're genociding them again. Whoopsie daisy. International Criminal Court, we're coming to get you. Now, the reason I wanted to talk about this is I want to show you what an absolute bunch of hypocrites the people involved in this are. So, Amo Clooney, who fancies herself to be a human rights lawyer, although what even is that? I think that's just a thing that you attach to your business card. Like, what does that mean? What do you have to do to be a human rights lawyer? It's my understanding that Amo Clooney was an entertainment lawyer, which is how she sort of ended up in the Hollywood world, wherein you would come in contact with your future husband, George Clooney. She was one of the experts who advised on the International Criminal Court arrest warrants. She was part of the team who drew a moral equivalency between the leaders of Israel and the terroristic leaders of Hamas. Now, as we all know, any reasonable person, unless you're just completely colonized by radical Hamas propaganda, I mean, Hamas recorded the rapes and murders themselves. You know, it's their body cam footage, which proves the rape as a weapon of war and the ongoing sexual assaults. I mean, I'm loath to talk about it, but I've spoken to MPs who have seen the footage, and I think they'll be forever changed. But Amal Clooney, I don't even care enough about her to say her name right or to learn how to say her name right, because I have a special level of disgust for this woman, because she rose to prominence after becoming George Clooney's wife. She sort of used that to catapult herself into this like feminist defender of women who have been subject to sexual assault as a tool of war. Because she was the lawyer for Nadia Murad. Many of you will remember that name if you've been around politics a fair bit, because she was the Yazidi sex slave who was taken by ISIS. And then she basically had to shame Justin Trudeau into declaring what was happening to the Yazidis and the Christians at the hands of ISIS to be declared a genocide. Amal Clooney was her lawyer and represented her at the United Nations to push the United Nations to investigate ISIS using rape as a tool of war and control and genocide. And so right now, Little Miss Rape Shouldn't Be a Tool of War is completely glossing over rape as a tool of war. And it isn't even a war. I mean, it's a terrorist attack. How is she just completely glossing over what Hamas did on October 7th? Strange, isn't it? It's hypocrites everywhere. Let's go into, that's enough of these lunatics at the International Criminal Court. Way to discredit yourself, by the way. Like, will anybody ever take them seriously ever again? Like, ever again? Did anybody take them seriously in the first place? If you did, maybe reconsider that. Okay. But let's move into some immigration stuff happening here in Canada. Many of you may remember from last week, we sent our friend, videographer, video journalist, I should describe him as, because he's not just a videographer, Lincoln J. He went to Charlottetown, Prince Edward Island, where there is a bit of an uprising with international students. International students are clashing with migrant workers who want to stay in Canada long after their temporary work visas have expired. They think that they should be allowed to stay in Canada indefinitely and use our services and use our housing, which drives up the cost of housing for everybody else. And they're not doing jobs that Canadians couldn't do. I'm not against temporary foreign workers to fill gaps in the economy that we don't have workers for. But if we've got workers to work in the fish plants or whatever they're doing out there, why are we bringing in people from other parts of the world to do jobs that Canadians should be doing? Makes sense to me, right? But they're protesting. They want to go on hunger strikes to stay here. Now, if there's another side to this story, I'd love to hear it. Were they promised something by immigration consultants and paid a bunch of money to immigration consultants to come stay in Canada, saying, we'll get you here on a temporary work visa, and then we'll just figure out how to keep you here forever. Just pay us X amount of dollars. Okay, charge the immigration consultants then, but also send those other people home. The point of having a sovereign country with its own borders is that we get to decide who comes in and who gets to stay. Otherwise, why even have borders? We can have no borders, or we can have social programs. Can't have both, right? So Lincoln found, because, there's accusations of racism floating around now. If you're not for these temporary foreign workers from wherever they're from staying in Canada, then you must be a racist. Well, Lincoln ran into a former international student from India who spoke out against these migrant workers trying to, I guess, blackmail Canada into keeping them with a hunger strike. So let's hear from this.
See the loopholes that our incompetent government has created, and they have abused it.
If they don't fulfill any of the demands, there will be a hunger strike to death.
So we have the right to stay here.
We'll keep on striking until our last breath. We wouldn't give up.
I'm here to speak out against what is happening. It's not even about permanent residency. Canada's reputation for being such a soft country has gone global.
It's very hard to get a job in Canada right now. It's very difficult to secure even an interview.
It might be a little harder for the average Canadian to get a job now.
Conestoga made $140 million on tuition in the last 16 months.
And they're working in a minimum wage in a food restaurant. That does not bode well for the country.
Establish yourself here. You bring your entire family over and then get use of all the social services that Canada offers. There's a couple of colleges that the Globe and Mail investigated, and they didn't even have classrooms in them, but they had places to process your immigration file.
We're helping new Canadians succeed and shape our country for the better.
There's a section of the society which is becoming rich off of these loopholes.
Fair enough. I don't think that guy, I'm willing to bet, since he was a foreign student, that he's probably non-Caucasian. So let's put the allegations of racism to rest. That's not what this is about. Those people could be from Great Britain and I wouldn't care. You don't get to blackmail us with your hunger strike to change the policies of a country that was kind enough to admit you temporarily so that you can make an honest day's living. This is how you repay us? By blackmailing us? No. Off you go. Get out of here. If an immigration consultant promised you something, let's deal with that too. Because if that's the case and they are the reason this is all happening. But yeah, sorry, no. Off you go. You are not our problem. Goodbye. Just the audacity of these people to think that they can blackmail us into staying. We'll have a hunger strike until we're dead. No. We'll just put you on a plane and get you out of here. Thank you. They'll give you some snacks on the plane and you can stop your hunger strike there. It's a long flight. I think you have to go to London, then to India. So you know what? British Airways is going to take great care of you. They'll give you those really cool biscuits that they have on those British Airways flights. You won't be hungry at all. It's a transatlantic flight. They'll give you a meal. You don't have to do your hunger strike. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. Okay? That sounds great. We've got another ad break, Olivia, and then we've got just, let's call it the potpourri round, as they do on Jeopardy. We've got a bunch of different stories. Got a story about some crazy lady rambling on about the Liberals defending a woman's right to choose, but the best part is watching the Liberal MP in the background. The horror on his face when he realizes that this is all going terribly wrong and this makes us all look crazy. But we'll get into that after the break. Let's hit an ad break and then we'll come back.
Canadians are grappling with news blackouts on social media due to the Justin Trudeau Liberal government's Bill C-18. This new piece of legislation demands that social media platforms pay the government for news shared by users, which is an inconceivable task for companies like Meta and Google. So, as a result, they have decided to preemptively block all Canadian news content, including ours at Rebel News. In response to this, we have since teamed up with VPN provider Private Internet Access to ensure that you can continue to access all of our content across a broad range of platforms while also maintaining your privacy. For only $2 a month, you can bypass Trudeau's new censorship laws while you safeguard freedom of speech and continue to get the news that matters to you the most. Visit piavpn.com/rebelnews to take advantage of the 84% discount and 4 months free. As a bonus, PIA has all of its servers located in the United States, not China, and they automatically delete user data from their servers to avoid leaks and government subpoenas for information phishing expeditions. Don't delay. Head over to piavpn.com/rebelnews to stay up to date on the news in Canada and protect your access to it. Don't delay. You don't want to be left behind.
Why should you join Canada's National Firearms Association? We currently have one of the most aggressively anti-firearm governments in our nation's history, promoting fear and placing blame like never before. Our rights, freedoms, culture, and heritage, it's all on the line. But we are fighting back, and there is strength in numbers. We work within the law to change the law, to defend competitors, hunters, collectors, and other law-abiding firearms owners. We can get through this. We've done it before, and we'll do it again, if you are with us. Canada's National Firearms Association. Freedom, safety, responsibility.
It's really, really great patriotic ad. Hey, I like that ad too. Makes me kind of proud to be Canadian, fighting back against the tyranny of the Liberal government. Speaking of the tyranny of the Liberal government, they really want to impose their radical progressive worldview on everybody. And if you don't think the same way they do, if you think your doctor should have conscience rights, and if you think the churches should be able to believe what they want to believe without the hand of government mixing its way in the middle, then obviously you are some woman-hating radical, according to the federal government. And they're mad that not all MPs in this country believe the same way they do, that there are some MPs, at least in the Conservative Party, we know they're not allowed to run in the Liberal Party actually, who might believe differently than the Liberals on the matter of abortion. The Conservatives allow their MPs to hold whatever values they want on that issue. And they don't impose a party issue. They don't impose the party will on the people, because it is such a deeply personal thing. For many people, it's a science thing. For many people, it's a religious thing. For people like me, it's a science and a religious thing, why they might be pro-life. And other people just don't care. It's not an issue for them. It's not something that they think about. And so the Liberals are real mad about this. Maybe some Conservative MPs attended the March for Life a couple of weeks ago in Ottawa, and because the Liberals are failing in the polls, it's going to be just a Kim Campbell style butt whooping. I was going to use the other word there, but I'm doing my best not to swear. So anyways, it's going to be a Kim Campbell style butt whooping for the Liberals the next time around. I think the Conservatives, it's anywhere between like 202 seats and 212 seats of 338. And they're taking places that are sometimes Liberal sweeps, like Toronto and the Maritimes. The Conservatives are gaining seats, and in the Lower Mainland, they might gain some seats. So, I mean, not God willing, from my lips to God's ears, those Liberal MPs in Alberta, Randy Boissonneau, find themselves unemployed. Anyway, they held a press conference with some radical feminist old lady bra burners who are very strong on the pro-life, pro-choice issue, as in they don't want the pro-lifers to have the choice to be pro-life, and they're very mad about it. And so they start going off a little bit, and the MP in the background, I forget which one it is, I'll remember as soon as I see his face. He seems fine in the beginning, and then his eyes sort of get pinwheely when he realizes this is going off the rails. And then, to my amazement, somebody in the media pushes back. I mean, this video has everything. It just takes a little bit of time to get there. So hopefully you'll bear with me as we watch a little bit of this disastrous press conference together.
Representative Women's Caucus and members of the Liberal Party, and we've sent a letter to the Leader of the Opposition asking him to be very clear with Canadians, and in particular with Canadian women, on what he would do to defend a woman's right to choose. We've seen that his caucus, there are many anti-choice caucus members. We've seen some of their actions recently, including MP Kathy Wagenthal, who at the pro-life rally held here last week said that women who have abortions end up needing redemption, forgiveness, and needing God. We as women want to know whether the Leader of the Opposition will ensure that his caucus does not put forward legislation that in any way impinges on women's rights and freedoms, in particular bodily autonomy.
His office has already said that.
What is not clear? His office has said that they're not going to use the notwithstanding clause on abortion to regulate abortion. He said he's not going to legislate it, introduce it, pass it. So what part's not clear?
That's his government. There are ways that you can have private members' bill that are introduced as well, and the risk is still there. You know, he voted against Morgentaler back in 2008 as person. I mean, he is, in every sense, that caucus and that leader has made women wonder about the risk that they're going to be taking with this leader. And I want him to come out and unequivocally say that they do everything to defend a woman's right to choose, that they will not allow their members to come forward with private members' bills and put forward bills that suggest that a fetus is a person, which is a backdoor way of, again, addressing this issue.
Is it he was here. The Harper government had 10 years. I know you weren't here. Many of us were. 10 years in power. They had 4 years as a majority, didn't move one bit. And they had private members who wanted to do things. Guys, you are all 30 points down in the polls. I'm looking at some of you will not get reelected if there was an election this fall. This is the most cynical play to just throw the abortion scare tactic. Would you like to respond to that observation?
Absolutely. It's
Please.
Not a scare tactic. We've seen what's happened in the States. Do people really think Roe versus Wade would have been overturned? Do we think what was happening there was going to happen? I've been in the women's movement for over 50 years. It is not a scare tactic. Things are going backwards, not only in Canada, but around the world. And these are real risks for Canadians. We need to know very clearly that that party, policies put forth at the convention, individual members are not going to introduce things because we do not want to go the same way as the United States. So it is not a scare tactic. It is a very strong concern. And I may not have been here then, but I was other places working on women's rights, okay? So do not use that as a reason why it's not a scare tactic.
Last question. Let's just put it back the other way. The government hasn't also legislated to protect abortions either, right? So why doesn't your government introduce legislation to make it harder for that to get rolled back if there is a conservative government?
Thank
you. You do not want to legislate woman's body. You do not legislate woman's body. That is not, you make sure that you have access to abortion. You don't want to legislate anybody's body, particularly a woman's.
Even if that is to protect the right to choose, like you're calling?
No, you don't want to legislate your ovaries, your uterus. No, that is not the way that you protect women's rights.
That went poorly, didn't it? That was Talib Noor Mohammed, Talib Noor Mohammed. He's the chronic house flipper from British Columbia, who they trot out without any sense of irony whatsoever to do housing affordability announcements. And it's like, listen, dude, the actions of you and people like you are one of the reasons houses are so unaffordable in the Lower Mainland. That went very, very poorly. Even the media are not buying this line. They say it's cynical. And it is true. Like, Stephen Harper and his hidden agenda is so hidden that nobody's ever found it. Like, after 10 years in power. The leader of the official opposition, and once again, from my lips to God's ears, the likely next prime minister of this country, has said he's not going to legislate on this issue. Also, a gross misunderstanding of what the overturning of Roe v. Wade actually meant in the United States. What it meant was the states, who should have always had this issue, would legislate for their respective jurisdiction so that if somebody disagreed, if enough voters disagreed with how that state legislated on the issue, you could just change the government and change the legislation, which is why some conservative states have said, this is not a state where you can do that. And some of the more radical states like California, they're going the other direction. So, and I think that's probably the best way for it to be. I mean, as a religious pro-life person, I mean, that's not the best way, but I think this is the way that respects the diverse viewpoints which exist in certain states in different areas, that they're not being governed by the federal government on an issue that should have always been in the realm of the states. In Canada, we don't even get that. We can't say, well, we don't want to pay for that in Alberta. Feds will withhold our transfer payments. But yeah, Talib Nur Mohammed, halfway through, his eyes got a little shifty, didn't they? And he's like as soon as the media started questioning them, and the dusty old menopausal marms who are fighting for the right to have their daughters abort their grandchildren, when they got a little testy with the media and then didn't answer the questions in any sort of reasonable way, he realized that he probably shouldn't have been standing in the background of that press conference. Oh, I love when these people just get the awkward situations that they deserve. Next video. Pierre Poilievre asked Trudeau how high his carbon tax would have to be to get the forest fires to stop. And then Justin Trudeau said, if you don't think that taxes change the weather or stop cigarette butts from flying out of car windows, that you are engaging in climate denialism at its finest.
Prime Minister's carbon tax applies on barns, on grain drying, on fertilizers, on off-farm vehicles. It costs literally tens of thousands of dollars for many individual farmers, all of which gets passed on. But the Prime Minister, instead of defending his taxes, resorted to a really wacko and unhinged claim that if Canadians just paid more taxes, there would be suddenly less fires. I thought that water and not taxes put out fires. But maybe the Prime Minister can clarify, how high would his tax have to go for forest fires to stop?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians are facing the impacts of the extreme weather events that come from climate change that are unfortunately getting worse and worse every year. That is why our government from 2015 onwards has stepped up in the fight against climate change, because not only are we reducing Canada's emissions to the lowest level outside the pandemic in 25 years, but we're also stepping up in the jobs and technological innovations that the world needs to successfully fight climate change. We will continue to fight climate change, Mr. Speaker, and put more money in people's pockets while he sits with his arms crossed and
the Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
He didn't answer my question. Now he says that his taxes are going to make Canada a high-tech wonderland. Before, his claim was that it was going to stop forest fires. It's him that made the link, not me. Obviously, I think the link between the two is absolutely ridiculous, because his tax is not an environmental plan. It's a money-collecting plan. It's a plan of government greed. So I'll ask the question again. He wants to hike the tax to 61 cents a litre. If it gets to that high and people are all starving in the streets, will that stop the forest fires?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, in the Leader of the Opposition's desire to make clever rhetorical points, he actually completely ignores the basic facts. The price on pollution is revenue neutral for the federal government. That means the money that comes in for the price on pollution, for the carbon tax, gets returned to the jurisdictions, and is why the Parliamentary Budget Officer found 8 out of 10 Canadian families in jurisdictions where the carbon price applies do better with the Canada carbon rebate that comes in 4 times a year than the price on pollution costs them. That's a plan to fight climate change and put money in people's pockets.
This goes on for another minute or so. And we're just going to all get stupider from watching Justin Trudeau tell us that this is climate denialism at its finest. How dare you, conservatives, not believe that giving money to the federal government will stop arson and careless use of campfires and sparks falling off the tailpipes of ATVs and lightning. You know what? I firmly believe, and if I don't believe it, then I'm a climate denialist at its finest, that if I pay more money to Justin Trudeau than the farmer who blew a tire on my road 2 weeks ago on his trailer and the sparks caused a grass fire, the problem is I wasn't paying enough money to Justin Trudeau. So if I had paid more money to Justin Trudeau, then it would have kept the air in my neighbor's tire, and then it wouldn't have caused a spark on the pavement, which then caused a grass fire a couple of weeks ago. So my fault, I guess. I'm the worst. We're all the worst for not voting for Justin Trudeau, as you know. I skipped over a video, and I must go back to it, Olivia, because it is in the headline of the show. It's in the description of the show, and so I must touch on it. Mark Miller, a Liberal immigration minister, saying that it's going to be easier than ever to become a Canadian citizen. He wants to find what the government calls lost Canadians. Just leave them lost, maybe. Why do we gotta find them? Anyways, let's watch this video. I'll quickly comment on it, and then maybe if we have a minute, I want to just briefly touch on Nili Kaplan-Myrth losing her marbles again. She, like Chrystia Freeland, is a bit of a muse for me. I just love all things Nili Kaplan-Myrth. It just fills up my joke tank so that I'm good for the rest of the day. Just one video of Nili Kaplan-Myrth acting like a lunatic with her eyes doing that like thing that she does when she gets a little bit off the rev limiter. So let's listen to Mark Miller first, and we'll quickly talk about that, and then we'll move on to Nili Kaplan-Myrth.
And we have citizenship by descent, individuals who are born outside of our country to a Canadian parent. As Canadians, we're a diverse group, but we all share a common set of values, take pride in who we are and what our country stands for. We're a country that supports human rights, equality, and respect for all people. There's no doubt that Canadian citizenship is highly valued and recognized around the world. We want a citizenship to be fair, accessible, with clear and transparent rules. Not everyone is entitled to it, but for those who are, it needs to be fair. That's why when issues arise around citizenship law, it's important that Parliament addresses them. The proposed legislation will extend citizenship by descent beyond the first generation in a way that is inclusive and upholds the value of our citizenship. If passed, the bill extends automatic citizenship to anyone who is born outside the country to a Canadian parent before the legislation comes into force. We also introduced amendments to respond to issues raised at parliamentary committees as well as in the courts. They will restore citizenship to those we call lost Canadians. That could be someone who was never able to become a citizen or lost citizenship because of previous and outdated legislative provisions. While the government previously brought forward changes that fixed the status of most lost Canadians, a small impacted cohort remained. Under the new legislation, children born abroad to a Canadian citizen who is also born outside Canada will be a Canadian citizenship from birth if their parent can demonstrate they have a substantial connection to Canada. As long as a Canadian parent who is born outside of Canada.
Let me just explain what they're doing here. So it's not just for children born to Canadian parents who are living outside of Canada. So Stephen Harper put a stop to this stuff in 2009 because we had a lot of citizens of convenience. They had come to Canada primarily, I think this was during the Lebanese War. They came to Canada, were fast-tracked on their citizenship, were here, got their citizenship, and then left and never came back, never voted, never had any substantial ties to Canada, didn't own land here, like nothing, never even visited. But they had this Canadian citizenship, and because they were Canadians, never living in Canada, never using their citizenship and having having children, those children were by default Canadians, even though they would probably never live here. They were born to parents who had never come back after receiving their citizenship. And so they just put a stop to it. So what the Liberals are doing, it sounds like here, is making those people, those children of the citizens of convenience, now Canadian citizens. I'm not sure what the motive is there. And but it also now will work on the next generation. So once their new law passes, Canadians born abroad who are not citizens will receive their citizenship. And also, if those Canadians, lost Canadians, I call them, have children, those will also be Canadians, even though now we're 2 generations removed from ever having a tangible relationship with Canada. Why? Why do this? What is the point? What is that? This just waters down the value of a Canadian citizenship. We're giving it to people who don't even necessarily even want it. And what are they going to use it for? Well, I know what those citizens of convenience used it for last time when a bit of turmoil popped off in the Middle East. We had to evacuate them all. Even though they had no tangible relationship to Canada, they said, excusez-moi, I'm a Canadian citizen, get me out of here. And then we did. And then they didn't like the accommodations we got for them. And then they all turned around and went back. And that's why Harper did it, because he was like, the heck? These people aren't Canadians by any real measure of what it means to be a Canadian. Well, we've not just expanded that, we've actually expanded it to a next generation. All right. Great. I wonder why they're doing this. What is the point? Were we just trying to round up more tax dollars? I don't know why we're doing this. Okay, Libby, if we've got a minute, can we talk about Nilly Kaplan-Worth? Okay, so for those of you who don't know and haven't seen my previous reporting on Nilly Kaplan-Worth, you can go to firenilly.com and see all of that. But she is the maniacal, out of control Ottawa Carleton District School Board. She's a trustee there who claims that anybody who doesn't like her is an anti-Semite. I think I'm a philo-Semite. I'm not much of a philo-Nilly Kaplan-Worth, though, if you know what I mean. She is a kookaloo. She censors parents in person who speak out against her radical sex agenda. If you don't believe that drag queens somehow miraculously fix childhood literacy rates in grade 1, you are somehow a transphobe or whatever. She censored parents who came to the school board to speak out against what the elected school board was doing. You know, that's what the process is for, so that people have their say. Well, she was having none of that. She censored them. So I went to the school board to deliver a petition, because I said, if Nilly Kaplan-Worth isn't going to let these people have their say, I surely can. She actually had 2 petitions pulled down. This is my interaction with her.
And you will back off right now.
I'm trying to give you a petition with 8,000
You will back off. You will back off.
She pulled the door out of my hand and screamed at my face, and I just laughed. I mean, what do you do when confronted with a lunatic? Like it was just so comical. What do you do but be a happy warrior when someone is a grown woman? Like, I'm sure her and I are close to the same age. We must be, right? Like, I'm in my mid-40s. I think she's in her mid-40s. We both have a couple of kids. I just was like looking at this upside down version of myself, and she was acting crazy. She slammed the door in my face. She wouldn't take my petition. She had 2 previous petitions of the parents pulled down. And she is like a chronic progressive protester also in Ottawa. And so she's an ally of the trans LGBTQ alphabet community. But some of her former allies are parting ways with her on the state of Israel. I love when the left eats their own on certain issues. And she had a book signing because she has gotten in trouble now with bullying at the school board. The school board was fine with her bullying parents. It's when she turned her ire on her fellow trustees that they got upset. and they gave her some trouble. And she wrote a book about how tough it is to be Nili Kaplan-Murth, the doctor who wore a mask in a CTV, I think it was, interview in her office, because she's also COVID hysteric, as these people tend to be. She had a book signing, and it went, well, roughly the same as my interaction with her down at the old Ottawa Carleton District School Board. Karima Syed, I think that's how you say her name. She's a strange bird, that lady. But her and her videographer, went to Nili Kaplan-Murth's book signing. And like I said, it went surprisingly similar to my interaction with Nili. Let's just see how this went.
Hi, Dr. Nili. Good luck with your book launch tonight. I just have a question for you. You've been public about your disappointment in Joel Harden.
Sorry.
Are you aware?
Why you're here?
Are you aware that Clayton Goodwin from his entourage
I need you to leave.
was harassing you as Sarah Snuggles long before October 7th?
It's a private establishment. I need you to leave. It's a private establishment. I can't have you in here. Excuse me. I need you.
Are you aware that Clayton Goodwin was Sarah Snuggles?
I need you to leave the building.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
I need you to leave the premises. I need you to leave the premises. It's a private establishment. You're not welcome right now.
Come back and we call the police. Got it?
Sarah Snuggles, are you aware?
I'm asking you to leave the building, please. It's a private establishment. You're not a welcome guest.
Have a good book launch.
They've asked you not to record it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a good night. You have a good night.
Oh God. I know that the gentleman known as Rowan the Stallion on Twitter had a bit, or X, I'm sorry, had a bit of an interaction with her too. She accuses him of stalking her. He's just an independent journalist who has the unfortunate task of watching the Ottawa Carleton District School Board meetings and then reporting on them. What they're talking about there is Joel Harden. I think he's an Ontario MPP for the NDP. And he would march in these, I don't know, trans rights protests, Pride Parade, Pride season, Pride half year, whatever we're at now, demonstrations with Nili. Well, now he and Nili are no longer friends because he is pro-Hamas and Nili is pro-Israel. Although I'm not sure if she's pro-Israel, she's just pro-weaponizing her Jewish background as a defense against critics, but whatever works for her. And I guess a member of Joel Harden's entourage now has been harassing her as this anonymous person called Sarah Snuggles. Anyways, all of this is inconsequential to the fact that Nili Kaplan-Murth acts like that anytime she comes in contact with somebody who is not completely ideologically aligned with her. That woman is too fragile to be out there and just walking around in the public. It's too difficult for her to be out in the world with people having the temerity to hold a different viewpoint than her. It just, everything ends with her screaming at somebody, kicking them out, and threatening to call the cops. This I know through firsthand experience. I think that's it. Do we have any chats today? Okay, great. That's wonderful. One more thing before we go. I just want to show you this one little thing. It's a Rebel News article about, it's in the last little bit here. It's on pride flag burned at Northern Ontario High School. So serious investigation into this. The OPP retrieved video footage from the school, and an individual could be seen lowering the school's pride flag, ripping it off the pole, setting it on fire, and immediately running away. News release from police said on Wednesday. And I think this is not the first time that someone has prickled against the LGBTQ agenda at this school. I think this is the second time or third time police were involved there. The only reason I bring this up is churches burned all across this country for, well, they're still burning. Christian churches were burned, and we never really had this sort of investigation. Like, it feels like the police are taking squawked tires on a pride sidewalk, or, you know, the defacement of a pride flag more seriously than well over 100 burned and vandalized churches across this country. I guess some religions are more valuable than others, and the alphabet people's religion is more important than Christianity, or the fundamental institution that shaped Western civilization. So there's that. I wish us all well in the future. Our new country is going to be great. Okay, I think that's it, guys, on that somber, terrible note. No chats today. Please share the stream with your friends to help us get around internet censorship. Don't forget to leave a comment and let me know what you thought about the show. Thanks to everybody who works behind the scenes to put the show together. Olivia, Efron, all of our web team working in the background. They don't get the credit that they so rightly deserve. If you are in the Edmonton area, please join me at Church in the Vine tonight. Get your tickets to the show at endmade.com. If you're not in the Edmonton area, well, good news. Mirror, we've got the drive-in in Mirror, Alberta, Chris Scott's Whistle Stop Drive-In tomorrow night. From there to Grand Prairie on Monday. I got to take the day off for my daughter's grad. And then back on the road, then Fort St. John, and then Surrey, and then off to Ontario. So anyway, if you sound like you're in near one of those places or know somebody that is, go to endmade.com for tickets and showtimes. I think that's it. Thanks so much, guys. I'll see you back here. Maybe it'll be me next week. I forget my travel schedule. It's pretty hectic. Could be one of your other favorite rebels. But as my friend David Menzies always says, stay sane.
I asked him, and I said, how did they come to the conclusion that I was going to die? He said, because they didn't really know what to do with you.
The government of Canada is killing Canadians, and not just a few, and not just the terminally ill. Over 50,000. So far, 50,000.
They essentially evicted us from our buildings because we would not participate in this government euthanasia program.
Well, there is a startling new development in the ongoing controversy around veterans being offered medical assistance in dying.
Instead of help, are you familiar with our MAID program? He said, well, it's better than blowing your brains out against the wall.
Canadians are expecting us to get the job done.
Fraser Health is refusing to give information, and because of that, the police investigation had to close. Therefore, Fraser Health is covering information up.
And we know for a fact that our people in power do not take responsibility for anything. Right. So it's a financial save, a lack of responsibility, and then it's completely easy to just offer it to vulnerable individuals, and then they're going to take it. Personal freedoms are sacrificed, access denied, suffering ignored, and then foisted upon the families, all in the name of expediency. These are the stories of the families left behind, of the susceptible,